In March 1931, the door to room 552 of the Herald Square Hotel finally opened. Inside lived two elderly sisters who hadn't been seen in decades. Ida Wood, the elder, had called for help. Her sister was gravely ill. Hotel staff, an undertaker, and a lawyer entered the room to assist. The manager had worked there for years without ever seeing them in person, though their bills were always paid in cash. When the door opened, what they stepped into looked like a time capsule and a tomb. The air was stale. Stacks of yellowed newspapers lined the walls. Cracker boxes and old trunks filled the corners. Loose papers, jewelry, and envelopes sealed with wax were scattered across the floor. And amid it all sat Ida Wood, small, frail, and still composed. Once she had been one of New York's most glittering socialites, a woman known for her diamonds, her daring, and her marriage to a powerful man. But she hadn't stepped outside that hotel in 24 years. It was the height of the Great Depression, and while most of America was counting pennies, Ida's tiny room held something extraordinary: a shoebox containing nearly $250,000 in cash, gold certificates sewn into oilcloth pockets, trunks filled with securities, even a diamond necklace hidden in a cracker box. By the time investigators finished counting, her holdings surpassed $1 million, an unimaginable fortune in 1931. Who was this woman who had gone from ballroom to boarded room? How had she made and kept such wealth in a world where women rarely controlled their own money? And why did she choose to live out her final decades in isolation, surrounded not by people, but by money? To understand Ida Wood, we have to rewind back to a time when she wasn't Ida Wood at all, when she was a young woman named Ida Mayfield, and, as would later be revealed, even that name was an invention. With no fortune, no family name, and one radical idea that she could invent herself into wealth. Before she was the millionaire recluse, she was simply Ida Mayfield, or at least, that's the name she gave. She appeared in Boston in the late 1850s, a young woman of striking confidence and mysterious background. No one quite knew where she came from. Some said Louisiana. Others whispered of Southern aristocracy. Ida never confirmed or denied any of it. Instead, she let her poise and polish do the talking. What few knew then, and what court documents would later reveal, was that Ida Mayfield herself was an invention. She had been born Ellen Walsh in New Orleans to Irish immigrant parents. But the persona of Ida Mayfield, genteel and refined, opened doors Ellen Walsh never could. She understood something powerful. In an era obsessed with class and lineage, appearances could be currency. With a graceful manner, fine clothes, and a cultivated Southern accent, she built an image that made people believe she belonged among the elite. When she moved to New York, that illusion paid off. At just 19, she boldly wrote a letter to one of the city's most eligible men, Benjamin Wood, publisher of the New York Daily News and brother to the infamous politician Fernando Wood. The letter was part flattery, part invitation. She praised his intellect, his influence, his writing. It was audacious. And it worked. Benjamin invited her to meet him. That meeting would change the course of her life. Benjamin Wood was older, wealthy, and politically powerful, a man used to admiration and accustomed to control. But Ida was different from the women around him. She was clever, observant, unafraid to challenge him in conversation. He found her boldness irresistible. Their relationship began around 1857, while Benjamin was still married. For nearly a decade, their association straddled the line between scandal and secrecy. Then, in 1867, the year his first wife died, Benjamin and Ida married. After almost 10 years in the shadows, she became Mrs. Benjamin Wood. Their home at 453 Fifth Avenue soon became a showpiece of New York society. Velvet drapes, marble floors, a private ballroom. Ida hosted dinners attended by senators, judges, financiers. The young woman who had once invented her identity was now living at the center of Manhattan's elite. But while others drank champagne and traded gossip, Ida was studying. She watched how fortunes were made and destroyed, how rumors could topple reputations. The Gilded Age rewarded those who could dazzle. But Ida Wood was never dazzled. She was taking notes, because for her, society wasn't a game. It was training for survival. By the 1860s, Benjamin Wood was more than just a newspaperman. He owned the New York Daily News, served in Congress, and moved easily among New York's power brokers. Their mansion at 453 Fifth Avenue became a center of wealth, politics, and gossip, a place where journalists, financiers, and party men mingled over cigars and brandy. Ida, always poised beside him, played her role flawlessly. The elegant hostess with the quick mind no one quite understood. But behind the lace and laughter, she saw how fragile wealth could be. Benjamin's fortune rested on speculation, reputation, and risk, three pillars that could crumble overnight. During the Civil War, his newspaper took a controversial stand, opposing Lincoln's policies and sympathizing with the South. In 1861, federal authorities even shut down the Daily News for its Copperhead editorials. Scandal seemed to follow him. He was accused of backroom political deals and favoritism through Tammany Hall, and his gambling habits were legendary. Poker games at Delmonico's and the Hoffman House, where tens of thousands, sometimes even $100,000, could change hands in a single night. Ida watched it all. The volatility, the pride, the reckless confidence of men who thought money always found its way back. She didn't lecture him. She observed. When debts began to mount, she quietly took control of what she could. She sold jewelry when it fetched a good price, managed property holdings, and kept substantial sums in cash, not in banks, but where she alone could reach them. She followed the financial papers and reports, sometimes corresponding with brokers under her own name. Few women of her era handled money directly. Fewer still managed it with her discipline and instinct. By the 1890s, as Benjamin's health declined, Ida's independence was complete. When he died on February 21, 1900, he left behind debts and confusion. She, meanwhile, held reserves of cash, securities, and property, quietly secured in her own accounts. The widow everyone pitied turned out to be one of the wealthiest women in New York. But instead of returning to society, Ida did something no one expected. She sold the Fifth Avenue mansion, dismissed her servants, and vanished from the city's social calendar. In 1907, she moved into the Herald Square Hotel, the first step into the long seclusion that would define the rest of her life. After Benjamin's death in 1900, the invitations stopped coming. Society has a short memory, especially for widows who no longer host dinners or appear in the papers. But Ida didn't mind. She was finished with society's stage. She sold the Fifth Avenue mansion, dismissed her staff, and in 1907, quietly moved herself and her sister Mary into the Herald Square Hotel, a respectable but modest building near Broadway. At first, her move seemed temporary, perhaps a retreat from grief. But weeks turned into months, and months into years. Ida stopped attending social functions. She stopped visiting friends. Eventually, she stopped going outside altogether. Her only consistent activity was managing her money from the privacy of her hotel suite. She kept cash on hand, often storing it in shoeboxes, cracker boxes, and small trunks. She would visit the lobby only to pay her bills in person, always in exact change. If a clerk overcharged her by a penny, she noticed. Her lifestyle puzzled those around her. Here was a woman who once dined with governors, now living in a small rented room, eating the same meal each day: tea, crackers, and a bit of canned milk. When asked why she lived so simply, she replied, "Because I wish to." She read constantly: newspapers, financial reports, legal notices. Though she often claimed to be poor, she was believed to have maintained accounts in several banks under different names. She trusted no one completely, not even her sister, and never revealed the true extent of her fortune. By the 1910s, most of the hotel staff had never seen her face. She communicated through the door, sliding payment under it or passing short, written notes to the front desk. She had built a world no one could enter, a fortress made of privacy. To the outside world, Ida Wood was a relic, a once beautiful widow who had lost her mind. But inside her small, paper-filled room, she was entirely lucid. She wasn't retreating from reality. She was controlling it. Her withdrawal was not madness, it was strategy. Because when markets crashed and banks failed, Ida's fortune didn't vanish with them. It stayed right where she could see it, inside her room. By the late 1920s, few people even remembered that Ida Wood still lived at the Herald Square Hotel. She and her sister Mary had become whispers among the staff, ghostly tenants who paid in cash, refused entry to maids, and ordered the same groceries each week. Then, on March 5, 1931, Mary fell gravely ill. For the first time in decades, Ida opened the door and called for help. A nurse was finally allowed inside, and what she found defied belief. The suite looked as though it had been sealed for generations. Curtains hung in tatters. Dust blanketed every surface. The air carried the stillness of long neglect. Amid the decay sat Ida, now in her 90s, small, frail, but sharp-eyed. She kept her money on her person, unwilling to set it down for even a moment. When the nurse alerted hotel management, an undertaker and a lawyer soon arrived. Inside the suite, they found boxes and trunks crammed with cash, not just coins and notes, but gold certificates, bonds, and receipts from old real estate sales. Bundles of $100 bills were wrapped in newspapers and tied neatly with string. Jewelry and unredeemed bond coupons lay tucked in drawers and among clothing. Every package was labeled in Ida's handwriting, as though she had been curating a private archive of her own fortune. The inventory took days. By the time officials finished counting, the total exceeded $1 million, roughly 18 to 20 million in today's value. To reporters, it was a sensation. Headlines called her the Millionaire recluse. Newspapers filled their pages with speculation that she was insane, that she had starved in secret luxury, that she hid treasure maps among her linens. But beneath the gossip lay a simpler truth. Ida Wood had understood something most people never grasp. Wealth isn't always about display. It's about control. And in a world that had offered her little of it, as a woman, as a widow, as an aging outsider, she had reclaimed control in the only way she could, by keeping everything, her fortune, her privacy, and her choices, under her own lock and key. When Ida Wood died on March 12, 1932, at the age of 94, her story made headlines across the United States and Europe. Reporters crowded outside the Herald Square Hotel, eager for a glimpse of the woman who had lived like a pauper, but died a millionaire. The probate court soon became a spectacle. Dozens of distant relatives appeared, each claiming to be her heir. Investigators sifted through her papers, determined to trace her true origins, and discovered that much of what she'd said about her past had been a fabrication. There was no record of an Ida Mayfield from Louisiana, no trace of any Southern nobility. Instead, researchers found she had been born Ellen Walsh, the daughter of Irish immigrants. She had built an entirely new identity, one refined enough to pass as aristocracy and powerful enough to carry her into the highest circles of New York society. Her greatest investment, it turned out, had been in her own reinvention. Even after death, Ida's secrecy held firm. Her will was brief, modest bequests to her sister's caregivers and a few charities, while the remainder of her estate was left to distant relatives she barely knew. The estate was valued at more than $1 million, eventually divided among 12 heirs identified through her extended Walsh family line in Massachusetts and Ireland. When the last of Ida Wood's belongings were cleared from the Herald Square Hotel, what remained was more than a strange fortune. It was a portrait of a woman who had lived entirely on her own terms, quietly, cautiously, and with unshakable intent. Her money may have gathered dust, but her story still gleams. A quiet reminder that restraint can be its own form of power.